No. D, I'm pressing the wrong buttons.
You're also still not singing the song.
And the song's gone. It flew away. But something else will come back in its place. We have to have an open mind. So, hello, and welcome Thursday mornings at 11 a.m. Our QT Conversations. It's Qualified Tutors' answer to a podcast. It's our opportunity as a community to push our shared thinking forward. It's all about collective efficacy around here. We are better when we explore what good looks like together. It improves all of our practice. I can see that, Michael, that you've brought your thinking face today. I'm very much enjoying reading your expressions.
I'm based in the university today, actually. I'm based at the I live close to the university, so I'm based in the open forum of the university. So I'm in a very studious environment right now.
Oh, well, actually, that's a really, really wonderful place to start because who was it, Dee, that shared on the community this morning? Was it Claudine, that brilliant Peps McRae blog?
No.
Would you pull up that phrase for me about how seeing other people studying helps us to study, keeps us motivated? And in the meantime, I'll introduce our topic for today. And please help me to remember that we're going to stay on at 12 o'clock and have a 2-minute silence together, because that's a good way to spend our time and attention. So my 9-year-old has gone in with dressing up clothes today. They're dressing up as First World War, as World War kids, which was a bit of a worrying thing to look up. So she's wearing a smock type dress today into school. So here we are with the opportunity to explore what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and ideally to improve from the conversation. And as I posted in the group today, I'm up for a big idea today. And so I put out a poll saying, do you want to talk about how AI is already changing education? Do you want to talk about what children need? Or do you want to talk about what is education for? Probably they're all the same thing. Pretty sure we're going to touch on all the topics. But the vote was for what is education for? And I think that that's a really intentional place to guide our practice for. Why do we do what we do? What is education for? Throw that out there for me, please, someone. Give me your first thoughts.
I think the phrase future readiness is what comes to mind really at the moment. And this is why I voted this morning for the, I changed my mind a little bit actually, but I really thought I've been questioning some of what we're doing with Charterhouse 9 actually. And I've been reflecting on it a little bit. We're so exam focused, so GCSE and A-level focused at the moment. And I would love to be able to offer a bit more holistic or co-curricular, perhaps, for a better phrase, because I do think the purpose of education is make sure they're ready for adulthood and for change and for work, everything, which, it's like my day-to-day life and then, I don't feel like I lean on those GCSE and A-level qualifications as much. It's so much more softer skills or I don't know, just communications, a variety of things that I've just been reflecting on it a bit really. After that hold on.
Fantastically helpful way to start. Obviously, it's a false dichotomy between academic and work-based competencies. It's not one or the other, but it's a really, really helpful place to start thinking about why we're doing what we're doing, why we're teaching what we're teaching. And I hope that we come back to that idea of competencies, but I want to share something quite personal with you. So Odette and I often have this conversation. Actually, I often have this conversation at her because I was really good at school and she's dyslexic. She struggles with exams. And she very quickly left. She didn't go to uni. She went straight to work and worked her way up. And I've never met anyone with a work ethic like Odette Wellman. Meanwhile, I am so worried about doing things properly and getting an A. Do I know how to work at that pace? I don't think so. I think that it is really interesting that, and we talk about perfectionism in this space often. There is something counterproductive to a productive work life that sits in academic success, I think. So much so that I saw my 16, honestly, I don't know why I'm being so personal. My 16-year-old is studying really, really hard for her GCSEs, and I felt slightly jealous of her this week because I thought to myself, you know that if you study hard, you will do well. I don't know that if I work hard, I will do well. Success is not as guaranteed in real life as it is in academia. So what those skills are, I think is really, really interesting. And whether success in exams equals success in life is a really interesting place to start. Thank you, Michael. Katie, can I call on you next?
Okay.
What's education for?
I think it's a lifelong journey, isn't it? I think everybody's on a path throughout their life. And education obviously starts as you know, in the child developmental phase, but it's something that if you you know, enjoy and you know, you are going to be learning throughout the rest of your life. So I think it's really being set up on the right path towards going through life, and you know, you'll continue to learn and hopefully enjoy learning until the day that you die.
I feel like you just hinted at a distinction there between education and learning.
Um,
For us? Or did you not intend that?
I think that was just the first thing that came out of my head. So if you want to build on it,
Do you
yeah.
have a sense of a distinction between education and learning?
Well, yes, I think I think there are distinct groups, but I think that yeah, just off the top of my head, when I was asked that question, that was what came to mind. But I think they are connected, but obviously different. So obviously, you know, part of education is to inspire the joy of learning, and to you know, hopefully get individuals to enjoy learning. So you know, in that sense, obviously education itself, I don't know, maybe help me out here, but it's
Yeah, go on. Have a go.
Well, you know, within the phrase of I'm going to get an education, you know, that's maybe a bit more directional towards you know, achieving a specific goal, be that, you know, passing your physics GCSE or A level, or within another subject. And obviously we've got the wider collective term at school. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. Let's hold on to it and come back to it. I think even just simply, you know, that learning is a verb, and that education is a noun can be quite an interesting thing to explore. You know, comparing different approaches to education. I wonder whether learning is universal and education is somehow synthesized and about being fit for society. That's what's occurring to me at the moment. Maybe also based on Michael's idea of future proofing, so preparing children for their futures. And we are going to have to touch on AI and changing futures. David.
Sorry, I had.
What's education for?
Yeah, good question. What is it? Was it was Einstein, or at least apparently it was Einstein, who said that education is what remains when you've forgotten everything you learned at school. I think that was the quote, but it's widely attributed to Einstein.
My dad used to say things like that.
Yeah, but it's quite a good one, because I think it is. It's like the residue, isn't it? It's what you've been through a process of learning, and at the end of that, I mean, this month, you know, all the kids I'm seeing this month are filling their heads with stuff. And do I need to learn that, or do I need to understand that? You go, well,
Oh,
you know, I say, well, you know, it's probably helpful to understand it. It's always better to understand something, because then you got a better chance of remembering it anyway. But if it's going to be of any meaning, again, you really want to understand it. But I know damn well that there will be students leaving in a month's time, and they will have learnt the colour of aqueous copper 2 ions, and they won't ever use that fact ever again. But they may well have got a mark in their A-level chemistry for it.
Right. So
So-
education is also about opening doors.
Yeah.
Yeah. They need
Right.
to pass the thing in order to get through the next thing,
Yes, if that is education, yes.
if that is education.
I mean,
Well,
because
because I'm
part
just
of the
thinking about
process.
your clever kids asking that, do I need to know it or understand it? You know, how many marks is this piece of knowledge worth? How
Yeah.
much learning power should I give it? It's quite canny.
Yeah, it's canny, but it's sad at the same time, isn't it? Because it's
Why?
it's because it's seeing learning of facts as the important thing, whereas it's clear, especially because of technology, that facts aren't the important thing. It's in life, it's going to be about judgment, satisfaction, deriving motivation I talked about this morning. The idea of you need to be able to interact with the world around you in such a way that actually it sustains you as an individual. And no amount of knowing facts, well, I would I would argue that no amount of knowing facts is actually going to sustain people. It's going to be about knowing your way, how to navigate life in general. So hence the idea of what education is what remains after you've been through that process, whatever that process may be defined out.
So there's a few pieces here. There's the knowledge-based curriculum versus the skills-based curriculum. I grew up in a heavily skills-based curriculum approach, and you wouldn't want me on your team in a pub quiz. But we know that Bloom's taxonomy says that the knowledge sits at the basis of the pyramid, because if you don't have the knowledge, then you can't synthesize the knowledge, you can't compare or analyze the knowledge. So you do have to have that knowledge at the bottom there. No,
Undoubtedly.
there are very few teachers who would argue that you don't need to know the stuff because Google does, because we need to be able to know that stuff to evaluate the material, and we want our children to have that basis of knowledge. But you said something else there. Oh, I know. Okay, so my 16-year-old, it's very useful having 5 children because I've basically got an antidote
Yes.
for any scenario. He has just failed his theory test. He's getting A's in his A levels, and that is, who just dropped off? Michael, he'll be back in a second.
Michael.
He's doing brilliantly in his English, drama, and film A levels, but he's failed his theory test. There's a lot you can tell me about this child. Yes, he is really analytical, he is really conceptual, and he's not good at holding basic facts. And I think that's really, really interesting. And he came home and he was so gutted. He's 4 marks off the pass in the theory. And I was actually really relieved for him, because frankly, you don't want your child to scrape a pass in any driving test. Hello, you. It's really, really nice to see you. So Jenna, we are talking about what is education for. I know you're going to have tons to share with us. We're just catching our first initial thoughts. I'm going to go to Dee and then I'm coming to you. Okay, let's go. Dee, go ahead.
When I hear the question, what is education for? What immediately pops into my head is something I saw a little while about comparing what the classroom of today looks like compared to what the classroom looked like when we felt we needed an education system, because we were improving the literacy and the numeracy of those people as at the start of the Industrial Revolution. And that so many things have evolved and changed and moved on, and yet the way we teach, the way we do education looks exactly the same today as it did in the 19th century.
If you guys haven't seen, there are 2 really lovely videos. They're sort of TED Talk-ish that are worth looking at. One is Siddhartha Mitra's School in the Cloud, and the other is Anything by Prince EA, and he's fabulous because everything rhymes with him. Do you go ahead?
The driver in the 19th century was to upskill people, was to make them literate and numerate in order to be able to engage in this industrial revolution that was going on.
And the empire.
So we sat them in rows and we improved literacy and numeracy, and lots of other great things happened because of the Education Act, that kids couldn't work below a certain age, and women's education came on and all that kind of stuff. So why are we in the 21st century with AI and goodness knows what else? Why does that look the same? If we're trying to give people skills to work, to do life, and it looks the same, why isn't it working?
Well, because everything else has changed. And we spoke last week, and I was so happy where the conversation landed last week when we were discussing neurodiversity. And we were talking about the misalignment between what life looks like and what school looks like, which is exactly what you're touching on here. I do think it's worth pointing to the fact that we are all in a position of immense privilege. Because to be reflecting on the purpose of education means you've got to have a certain amount of education under your belt to be in such a conversation. So if it's the difference between getting work and not getting work, education needs to be had, and raising kids to be able to access a salary is step one, or advocate for themselves, or read letters that get sent to them. All of those things are stage one. Literacy and numeracy are functional skills. And yet it's not enough. And worse than not enough, literacy skill levels and numeracy levels are not rising. So what is education for, and why is it not fit for purpose? Dee, I don't think you've given us any answers. I think you've just thrown up some questions, which was really, really sneaky. I'm going to go to Jenna. No, did you have something?
Because I'm a coach, Julia.
You are a coach. I'm going to go to Jenna, and then I'm coming back to you for that motivation thing that I asked to pull up. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Or is it not ready?
Clarify what it was you were looking for.
It was the bit about we get motivated by seeing other people learn.
Where was?
Oh,
did I?
Doesn't matter. I'll find it. I'll find
Okay.
it. Thanks. Jenna, go for it.
I have a quote for you. On I went, getting the best kind of education possible, which is the one that happens when you think you're having fun. Terry
Okay.
Pratchett.
I'm having a Terry Pratchett renaissance right now. I've done 5 audiobooks on the trot. I'm in monstrous regiment at the moment. So yes, because I picked up Sarah from dance lesson. This is the 3rd child I've mentioned in this conversation so far. I picked up Sarah from a trial dance lesson, and I and all the parents around me, I heard them all saying it as well, was, did you have fun? I wonder why the emphasis was on fun. And Jenna, do you want to explain it to us? Thank you, Michael. That's exactly the bit I was looking for. Go ahead, Jenna.
I think that I'm not going to quite answer your question.
Welcome back, my darling.
There is a widely accepted, I believe, theory that we are more likely to remember our trauma than the positive moments.
Yeah, not fun.
And I think it's more that the bad things are what come forward first, rather than it being a case of that's what we remember, because that's how we protect ourselves. We learn from the bad, we avoid the bad. And I have a personal theory that the biggest mental health epidemic is school-based trauma. I don't think we recognize 90+% of school-based trauma, of education trauma, because it's not just school, it's all of the associated things. And it's often, even for those who don't attend school, it's that forced punishment based, in whatever way, shape or form that punishment arrives, education. And I don't think we use the word education in the way that it means, in the way that it used to be meant.
Go on then. How should we be using the word education?
Education is the process of learning, often thought to be some sort of formal element to it, but you learn by going to the shops and having to buy stuff. You learn, and that is an education. And growing up, one of the things that I found interesting is, and like comparing now as well, conversations, is that I had literal lessons in how to talk to people. I had lessons, formal lessons in getting in and out of a car.
Knees together, I would assume.
It depends what you're wearing and what shoes and how high the car is and what materials the seats are and what it. But
for Teslas with the yeah.
No, we were taught how to get out of cars that with doors that lift up as well. But that was all education, and I do think that, I mean, Terry Pratchett comes to mind with a lot of conversations about education, because first of all, there's a lot about education in his Discworld series and in so many of his other works, but also because he talked about it. And one of the things that comes to mind a lot is headology. And one of the things that I find fascinating,
you need to explain headology.
is so in Terry Pratchett, he takes lots of different tropes and lots of different things that we might be familiar with and completely does that thing like when you do, there's an exercise where you say, if you were an alien coming to this planet, how would you explain it? Or what would you assume about this thing? What does it look like on the surface about how this thing works or how it came about? And he kind of does that and picks things apart. And he's so, so clever about it. And one of the things is magic and witching specifically. And the idea that, yes, there's magic, but there's something more specific than that called headology, which is just this idea that you decide something and that's the way it is and that's the way it happens and you have this power. I'll absolutely read that quote again in a moment. And that it's about how you use your voice and your intention and the changes that you make, and there's a process to learn that. And like learning to be a witch in the Discworld universe is something really specific, and that's still an education, but you learn how to think and how to think your way into the world and how to think the world into your way, I guess. Like you make things happen. And I think that there's so much in education that before formal education, even before things like governessing, there was still education. You still had to learn. You learned the way of the world. You learned, you know, how to hunt, how to survive, and all those things. And that's still education. And you know, people are good at what they do because they get something from it.
I am loving where you've taken us here, and it's actually full circle, because the first thing Michael said was it's about being about future proofing. So setting people up to be able to live in their future, and hunting and going to the shops and headology, which means understanding people and understanding yourself, is absolutely those things. If education is enabling people to live the life that they want to live, that's quite interesting, fit for purpose. And yes, Dee, that's not sitting in rows anymore. And I'm really happy, Jenna, that you said mental health, because the misalignment between what education looks like and what education needs to look like, in my opinion, that's where mental health is breaking down. And it's been happening for far longer than we realize, which is the trauma that you just pointed to, Jenna.
Absolutely. Shall I read that quote again?
Come on then.
On I went, getting the best kind of education possible, which is one that happens when you think you're having fun.
When you think you're having fun.
Yes.
Well, I definitely agree that learning can be lovely and it can feel like fun. And I feel that when we watch toddlers play, we know that that's what learning should look and feel like. Let's go around again. Let's go around again, and let's push on Help me here, Dee. My brain's seized up.
What's springing to mind with me here is, yes, fun is good, but if we're looking to change something that we can't do into something that we can do, then we're going to have to push through some discomfort, and that's part and parcel of the process, recognizing that there is going to be discomfort and embracing it and using that as part of the process.
So I'm working with a personal trainer at the moment, inspired by you. And this yesterday, he got me to get into push-up position and push the kettlebell from hand to hand. I think I cried. It was so hard. I think I cried. And there were 20 to get through. And I got through those 20 in twos. And I stood up and had to detox when there was a mental block and there was a physical block. And he kept saying to me, we don't give up. Which is an education in itself. Go on, Jenna.
So I need to know, first of all, completely aside, I need to know how you do this, because again, I was doing some research into so I use words and stuff. I use things like Sudoku and various types of puzzles to teach different skills, academic skills, exam skills, all sorts of different cognitive skills. And I recently attended a thing on the maths of Sudoku, and it's fascinating, and there's some very, very interesting things. And yesterday I did some proper digging into the research into Sudokus, from the cognitive sciences to the maths to computational complexities and all sorts of different things. And I think that it's really interesting. Some of the phrasing that came out of that feels very, very in line with what we're talking about. And that part of the reason that I use Sudoku rather than, say, just going over a textbook again or whatever is because there's a certain amount of perseverance that has to be learned, right? There's a certain amount of patience and forcing your brain to do different things and to slow down and to deal with frustration at the right thresholds, at the right pacing, with the right motivation. There has to be a certain amount of intrinsic motivation. It can't all be external rewards, right? It can't be sweets and stuff. Like, that doesn't work. That is not how humans have ever worked. Like, the reason we have any things we do is because someone has gone, ooh, and run with it. And I think that as much as people always say, oh, education is fun, education happens when you're having fun, blah, 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 I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the concept of fun in this. Fun isn't smiles and giggles and games. It's not gamification.
It's not
It isn't sweets. It isn't points. And it is that feeling of, I have never actually found a word for this in English, but that really specific moment of joy and fulfillment and light that you get, that only comes intrinsically, that only comes from inside. And that comes from that feeling of success, of feeling like you've achieved something, that you are more than you were, that you have copied something that has been modeled to you, that you have, you know, refaced a challenge, that you've taken that incremental step. And seeing that and feeling that, I think that natural positive element, even if it's really, really hard, it's still fun. Like, there's a certain amount of satisfaction, right? And I think that has to be considered as part of it.
I think I definitely hear you. For me, it feels like stretch, but I love the way you bring light and joy in there. I want to come back to this idea of purpose. I've intentionally structured the question with, what is education for? because I really think that it's about purpose. And I'm thinking about Michael, your context, and Jenna, your context. Those are very, very different student profiles. And I'm thinking about how, Michael, if you asked your clients what's education for, they'd have a really specific answer. And it would probably be different to my answer. Michael, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I mean, yeah, I've been reflecting a lot on what everyone's been saying so far, and I'll add my thoughts into that question as well, Julia. But I think I want to share first of all about what Dee was saying earlier about like the Victorian education style. I was reflecting on that a little bit because I had a meet up with a friend last week who I went to school with. So I'm nearly 40 now, so it's 20 years after we finished high school, secondary school, and and he said he just thinks our schooling was brilliant. He's really positive about it. Went to a grammar school, all boys grammar school, 30 in our class, and we actually then went around the whole classroom because you could remember every single individual student in that sort of horseshoe that we had, and we did it.
Oh,
Oh dear.
Michael's been doing the Zoom dance, that's for sure. Katie, I wanted to call on you next. Would you be happy to? Oh, he's back. But would you mind taking over for a bit, and then we'll come back to Michael?
Sorry, I keep
Michael.
getting kicked out all the time. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Okay, Katie, are you okay to pause then? Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Michael, go ahead, and then we're
I
going
think
to.
I think it's when I touch my earpod things, I somehow disconnect. But anyway, apologies for that. But yeah, I was just saying about how we're in the short horseshoe. We go around every single person who comes from the class, and they've all got like a really successful career now. We just thought, okay, well, our schooling must have been very, very good. And I've been reflecting on that a little bit, but I just want to make that comment. Really, actually, there's a lot of people feel like that Victorian style was very beneficial for them to get a good job. But I do think the learning is much more nuanced than just that. That was just the point I wanted to make earlier, but we'd have to look at that that's now. But I thought I'd make mention of that. And then when Jen was talking about making learning fun, and we've been talking about motivation a lot as well. I'm not sure whether you saw the Peps McRae daily snack today. I put it on my LinkedIn as well, but that was all about social motivation, how AI is not good at personalized learning through AI will get you so far, but you're somehow bypassing a little bit of the motivation there, a little bit, or bypassing the learning procedure a little bit. And so Pat McRae's snack today was about that social motivation, which is quite interesting, and how actually having a tutor can engage in that motivation. So that was a bit there. So I guess the next question you asked, Julia, was about purpose, and yeah, absolutely right. I mean, it's really our clients really are parents, aren't they? Really, so by and large, my Child House 9 deals with lots of 17, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, that sort of age group. So parents probably, let's say, early 50s on average. And so very much, they believe, and to an extent that's very true, that it is all about the good grades still, I think. When I was working in China, I have to say, in China, it was all about the university rank and the grades. It's crucial for that. But still, I think there are a lot of schools that will put a lot of emphasis on that good grade to open the doors. But so that's certainly the profile I'm dealing with and the expectation I'm dealing with. And so I know if I was trying to put something together, which I'm interested in doing in terms of like a co-curricular elective, like I'm thinking about like some on entrepreneurial or project-based learning, online elective, communication skills elective online. That's what I like to deliver and offer, but without there being a credential which is worthwhile at the end of it. I'm not sure we'll get parent buy-in for it really, so I'm hesitant to do it just yet until we do a bit more market research and look at the uptake or interest in it. Yeah, so I think back to the question about purpose, it is kind of what the parents are perceive. I think the parents buy-in is the crucial part at the moment. I think the child, certainly in my context, is very influenced by that. Yeah.
Katie, will you go ahead now?
Yes, so I guess leading on from you know, what Jenna was saying about you know, resilience and the idea that you know, learning is going to be, there's going to be an element of stress, and I guess, you know, it's only through going through periods, putting yourself in periods of stress, be that through doing exercise or you know, struggling or working hard at something that, you know, you don't quite get the answer to, and you have to kind of spend time thinking about it, trying different, you know, problem solving, trying different ways to solve the problem until you get there. That obviously is a skill set, and it is enjoyable, because obviously once you do get to the solution and the sort of mental pressure is off, that's the bit that is enjoyable. So I guess that, you know, being able to enjoy moments during the course of the day, you need this sort of more stressful moments in order to kind of reach that level, if that makes sense. And then finally, obviously on this topic of mental health, I think a big issue at the moment, you know, to do with screens and dopamine and you know, wearing that down throughout the course of the day. Obviously, you know, through sleep, we build back, you know, replenish our dopamine in the night. And you know, but it's certain activities, you know, will drain it. Uh, and obviously that's a massive difference that we're dealing with now, compared to, you know, sort of like the pre-tech era, whereby, you know, those sort of dopamine draining activity, it was easier to sort of control and streamline with regards to learning.
Yeah, and again, you know, kids struggling with being bored is quite interesting, where boredom is its own, on the one hand, struggle and stretch and discomfort, but also creates a vacuum for learning and thinking and imagination and creativity and all of those things. Jenna, I think it's really interesting, this sort of back and forth that we've had in the chat, where there's this strong pull to say learning is not, or education is not only for jobs. And that stress creates mental health breakdowns. And for me, I feel like there's learning, which is a mode, an approach, a natural discipline that we want to develop as a lifelong skill. And there are educations that we receive for good and for less good throughout our lives. You know, you can engage with somebody who's really unhealthy, and that can be an education in itself, can't you? Or you can go to a wonderful forest school and have an education in plants and trees. I think that education is maybe more tied, yes, to purpose, and also to context, so to the curriculum, whereas the learning is the doing, and is the discipline that sits behind it, and is the human and the universal. But there's something about education that has to have content and purpose sitting behind it. And then what's it for comes back to that question of, well, what's the world going to look for by the time the 10-year-olds or 20-year-olds? And that's an answer that we all struggle with finding. And that's why we're struggling to put answers in place. So yesterday I saw that in the States, and you won't often hear me talking about politics, certainly not international politics, Trump announced AI in education as a strong focus, and is doing that in order to compete with other countries internationally. And of course, I have a strong feeling that that's no child's problem. Do you know what I mean? Your international goals are not, our children are not fodder for your international goals. And so there's a lot going on there in terms of education as a political football, which is certainly something that we've seen in the UK, where different governments will come in and use and manipulate education in different ways. I think that what is education for is either really obvious or really obscure, and we haven't nailed it.
I think there's something missing from our conversation.
Good, tell me. You can see I'm struggling today. I'm not vibing, so help me.
4 words. Should, is, where, whom.
Should
What?
is
So
where,
you
whom.
seem to be circling back a little bit more to what education is for, or is used for, or is perpetuated as being for, very much now in mainstream Western and very like British, American, all of those kinds of environmental type,
Yeah.
place type, culture type places of what that is, and what it's fueled by and what its purpose is kind of in that game, and that we should, like, some of your questions, and this is a very common thing, like I have this conversation a lot, and people come back to that, is to how do we utilize what education and schooling is to make ourselves individually successful in a capitalist world. But also there's a question of what should education be for? What was it for? And you kind of touched on it there, is what will it be for? You kind of framed it a little bit more as what are we preparing now for the future for? And I know my words aren't wording correctly, but bear with. But also I think that there's a huge difference of what we are talking about in this very, Western Eurocentric view of what education is and should be for, but also it is different in different places. It is different in different cultures and different, even within, if you look at just the UK, just at England, not even just at the UK, and you look at different regions, you look at different classes, different social backgrounds, different cultures, and even within those intersectionalities as well, that whom makes a huge difference to the answers.
David?
So I'm not very good at this multitasking thing. I can't read and listen. I'm finding it, but that resonates.
Jenna and I also knitting and crocheting under the table.
Yeah, well, of course. yes. Absolutely. What Jenna's just said resonates quite powerfully with me, I think, because when you first posted the idea of discussing this, I was thinking, what is it? What is it for? Why is it clearly so important to us as society, as parents, as people becoming educated, and it's clearly education is terribly important. When you say what it's for, it is, it's then becomes an extraordinary question, doesn't it, really? And what is it for? Yeah. Now, I don't know who posted it. Somebody posted something about, is it about compliance? And I remember that very vividly, the sort of, your child's ready for school now. Now, what's that about? Right, I'm ready for school. And really what we're saying, are we, is that that child is ready to become, if you like, and I hate to use the word because it's going to, it's a relatively controversial word, but to be assimilated into society at large. So that child, now you're ready to go out into the world and become part of that. And I think we're missing so much in the way we do that, that it's potentially quite well, I suspect there's an awful lot of trauma associated with this idea that at the age of whatever it may be, 4.5 or whatever, children are ready or can go to school. And that's it, right? When we hand over to the school or the state and expect then that this job is kind of done, and that is similar. Sorry, I won't use the word again, but the education will take over. Is it any surprise that there are traumas that, and Jenna again talked about it earlier as a sort of school, did you talk about school-based trauma? Why? Well, because we've taken the child away from its parents. We've put them in an institution that has its own weird and wonderful rules and regulations, and we're expecting that child simply to be persuaded by whatever means to fit into a system that we have devised. So trauma, and this now begins to come back out. And sort of allied with that, I do think there is the social thing. Well, clearly schools are about becoming part of a society. That's fine in theory. But students who come and sit here quite often say to me, and these will be 16, 17-year-olds, say, well, this may be a stupid question. And it's almost like they've been embarrassed in the past to be embarrassed about the fact that they want to ask questions. And they're worried that it might be seen as a stupid question. And I make a very big point of saying, look, there is no such thing. It's never going to be a stupid question. This might be a stupid question. What is an atom? No, that's not a stupid question. That's an amazing question. Because actually, I'm really glad you asked it, because I'm not sure I can answer it. And no wonder there are traumas, because we are asking people to understand, believe things that, yeah, we can argue and we can construct things, we can devise things, that's fine. But we're asking you to kind of believe in these things. Now that in itself is traumatic. You map on top of that the idea that you may have peers who are going, oh yeah, I know what an atom is. What, you don't know what an atom is? Then it's the schooling, the setup that we have is almost, it's not deliberately designed to create trauma, but I don't see that we should be surprised that trauma is created, and that we are picking up time and again, I think, as tutors, the result of some of that trauma. Because what happens here, and as I say, why we're missing a trick is we're missing a trick between the idea of parent-school interface, and that what is education? Well, it's something to do with your school, it's something to do with your parents, and it's something to do with society, isn't it? Basically, these things together must make up your one's own education. I'll shut up now.
No, I mean, go and have a look over the chat. You've absolutely got us thinking. And for me, there's something we have to make sure that we do our pause at 12. For me, there's something, Dee, I'm coming to you next. There's something about, again, Michael, you started off by saying we're preparing children for life. And the question really is then, who's choosing which life we're preparing them for? Is it the parents? Is it society? Is it the state? Who's choosing which life we're preparing them for? And maybe I think it's really interesting that educators aren't taken as seriously as education should warrant if we are preparing children for the future of society, to run our world. This is not new news, but since we are all at the chalk face, I think it's about as relevant as it gets, because we're picking up all the trauma, we're rehabilitating, but for what? For what purpose? Dee, go ahead.
Sorry, I got distracted by something because husband's got to go out and collect something. Can you remind me of the question?
I'm the foggiest.
Jenna, what was the question? Dave, what was the question? Where am I going with this?
Why are you not asking Katie or Michael? I need to know.
My subtitles lagged out, sorry.
Okay, you've got 5 minutes left. Closing thoughts. Dee, closing thoughts. What's education for?
We should be equipping people to cope in a world that is changing really, really quickly. So we should be building resilient, flexible young people. That's awesome. What we should be doing.
Katie, what's education for?
Sorry, I'm not on audio. Okay. Education is for many different things. I think education has been around since way back into other species. I think it's something that has evolved. Now we have a formalized system of education, and I think its purpose is um, probably, I'm not sure it's possible to define it exactly.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay. Michael?
Yeah, I think indeed Dee described it quite nicely actually as well. And the future proofing thing, future readiness thing, I think is really important. I think something that's come out of the discussions today is about learning and education. I think that difference, which is quite interesting. Do you think education facilitates learning? Like learning is lifelong. The things that I before. Actually, something I've thought of really in the hour is about risk. Like I brought Dave was saying now earlier about what was it? I can't be saying now, but maybe think about risk. And actually, we need to be able to be brave. Yeah, no, there's no such thing as a stupid question. The idea of being confident and happy to ask anything and show curiosity. Actually, the things I thought about today as well.
Lovely. And I think that's beginning to be your pedagogy as opposed to, right? It's coming to narrow down into this is Michael Gates's answer to what education is for. It becomes quite personal. Jenna?
I am going to answer adjacently, which is we keep picking up on this word institution, the institution of education. Schools are institutions, it is even legally enshrined, right? And overall, the definition, children who are raised in these institutions often suffer from a lack of emotional care, which means that children are unable to form attachments and so much more.
And therefore, what is education for?
What it's being used for
No. What is it for? Yes. Let's go to shoulds.
To be amazing human beings that are full of curiosity and creativity and innovation and kindness and joy and everything that makes us human.
Yum. David?
The question is, what should it be for?
Yeah.
Well, it should be for, I think, as Michael says, future proofing. Yes, okay, future proofing, but equipping the next generation to be able to derive satisfaction, motivation from their future existence, but satisfaction to be intrinsic satisfaction in what they do, a sense of purpose in their lives.
Gorgeous. Ooh, this is so yum. I'm coming up with, it's about setting them on a path. It's about raising well-adjusted humans. It's about growing awesome humans. It's about life. It's about setting them up for life. To all of us in this room, education is like eating. Learning is like breathing, right? These are the fundamentals of life. Graduate worldwide empowerment. Okay, awesome. This has been just absolutely delicious. It's just about to turn 12 o'clock. With your permission, I'm going to leave this session running, and there we are. We're going to sit quietly for 2 minutes. that was really worthwhile. Thank you. I think if the first question was, what is education for? Then certainly participating in a 2-minute silence that that brings us together and recognizes our commitment to the way that we live and protecting and appreciating the way that we live, I think is well worthwhile. And I hope that the follow-on question from this conversation is then, if this is what education is for, how does the work that I do match up with that? Let's see if we can be those people for our students. Thanks again for your time. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, David. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Michael. See you all again soon.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.
Cheers.